You were chosen, not by accident, not by luck, but by divine intention, set apart for something sacred, something eternal. And yet, why does this particular battle, the sexual one, hit you deeper than any other? Why is it this area that feels like war? Why do you burn inside, even when you're trying to walk in purity? Let's be real. You're not crazy. You're not weak. You're not broken beyond repair. This is a battle almost every chosen one faces, but almost no one dares to speak of. Because this isn't the kind of war you can show. This isn't the kind of pain you can post. This is the kind that lives in silence, that screams in secret, that makes you question if you're still worthy of the calling. But hear me now. The shame is not yours. The silence is not protection. It's a trap. And the enemy knows. If he can keep you entangled here, he can slow down what heaven intended to accelerate. That's why this video exists. Not to shame you, but to free you. To put words to what your soul has been hiding. To say what nobody else has the courage to say, but what you've needed to hear. Because this battle doesn't disqualify you. It confirms just how dangerous you are to darkness. And if you stay until the end, you'll understand why this has been the war of your life and why your breakthrough will mark the beginning of something holy. Now, if this is already resonating with something deep inside you, hit the like button, subscribe if you haven't yet, and comment 99 in the chat, because 99 represents the number heaven left behind to chase after you. You're not abandoned. You're being pursued. Let's begin. They see your strength, your anointing, your resilience. But what they don't see is the battlefield behind your smile. This war doesn't look like chaos from the outside. It's not loud. It doesn't leave bruises on your skin. It leaves them on your soul. Because this isn't just a physical war, it's spiritual assassination. A war designed with precision, not to kill your body, but to infect your identity. When God marks your life, hell doesn't launch an obvious attack. It marks your desire, because it knows if it can't stop your calling, it'll corrupt the vessel carrying it. And what's the fastest way to distort the vessel? Seduction, isolation, guilt. Repeat. The enemy doesn't tempt you just to make you sin. He tempts you to disconnect you from your purpose, from your power, and from your perception of who you really are in God. That's why the attack comes when you're tired, not when you're full of fire, but when you're hungry for something deeper, for affection, for connection, for comfort. He offers the illusion of love, knowing it will leave you emptier than before. And here's what nobody tells you. Sometimes, temptation doesn't feel evil. It feels familiar. It feels like, finally, someone sees me. It feels like, this is harmless. But it's a slow leak, one that empties your discernment, drop by drop, until you don't even recognize yourself in the mirror. This is the hidden war, the one fought in silence, the one waged between verses of worship and moments of regret, the one where the same mouth that prays in the morning feels too ashamed to speak by nightfall. You're not fighting because you're unholy. You're fighting because you're chosen. The enemy doesn't chase the ones who are already chained. He comes after those who have keys. And what's wild is how strategic this warfare really is. He doesn't always send demons. He sends dopamine. He uses your own biology. He floods your body with cravings, then whispers that you're unworthy for having them. It's a trap of double guilt. First the temptation, then the accusation. But here's the revelation. You don't overcome by pretending the war doesn't exist. You overcome by admitting it and fighting back anyway. You fight with awareness. You fight with truth. You fight knowing that feeling is not the same as failing. Temptation is not sin. Silence is not holiness. And shame is not from God. This war is hidden, because exposing it terrifies darkness. Because if you ever realize that your greatest battlefield is actually the birthplace of your greatest breakthrough, you become unshakable. What if the enemy keeps dragging you back to this same weakness? Not because you're weak, but because he knows what's about to be born from your deliverance, your story, your voice, your freedom, your anointing, your ministry, all of it, forged in fire. The same fire that almost destroyed you is about to ignite you. So let me ask you this. What if your greatest shame isn't a curse, but a clue? A clue that this is the exact place where heaven plans to turn the tide. You were never meant to fight this alone, and you were never meant to be defined by the battle. You are not what you've done. You are not what you've felt. You are not what tempted you. You are who God says you are. And if this is the area the enemy keeps attacking, maybe this is the very area heaven intends to anoint. Because purity doesn't start with perfection. It starts with awareness, with repentance, with courage, with brutal honesty before a God who already knows it all and still calls you by name. Let this sink in. If this battle is this relentless, it means your destiny is even more explosive. And maybe, just maybe, what you've been calling a weakness is actually the womb of your greatest spiritual weapon. So don't tap out now, because what's coming is holy, and hell knows it. Stay with me, because what I'm about to show you next will change the way you see not just your struggle, but your calling itself. Let's go deeper, because sometimes to understand your current battle, you need to look into ancient mirrors, not at people who failed because they were weak, but at those who were favored, anointed, handpicked by God, and still stumbled in this very war. Let's talk about David. The same David who defeated Goliath with a stone was later defeated by a glance. The same man who danced before the Ark of the Covenant, who wrote psalms that we still sing today, became the architect of adultery and murder. Not because he stopped loving God, but because in a moment of isolation, he looked, he lingered, and then he fell. But here's the deeper layer no one talks about. David wasn't on the battlefield when he fell into sin. He was off duty. He was idle. He was vulnerable in stillness. And temptation thrives in spiritual passivity. One wrong glance from a rooftop unraveled years of favor, honor, and warfare. Why? Because even the most anointed are still human, still targeted, still capable of collapse when desire becomes stronger than discipline. Then there's Samson, chosen before birth, a man born under prophecy. His strength wasn't just physical, it was divine. He tore lions with his hands. He broke ropes. He humiliated armies. But one woman, Delilah, brought him to his knees, not with weapons, not with force, but with attention, with validation, with the illusion of affection. She asked him again and again, "Tell me the secret of your strength." And eventually, worn down, tired, and emotionally drained, he gave it up. Not because he was evil, but because he was exhausted. His downfall didn't start in bed. It started in the conversation, in the compromise, in the idea that his calling could survive in enemy hands. And when his hair was cut, so was his access to power. Not because the hair held magic, but because it symbolized consecration, set-apartness, obedience. And when he gave it up, he gave up everything. Now let's shift to Joseph, a young man with dreams so big they threatened the people around him, betrayed by blood, sold into slavery, wrongfully imprisoned, and still, in the middle of injustice, he held on to something sacred. One day, Potiphar's wife grabbed him, pulled him, invited him, not once, but daily. And Joseph didn't just say no, he ran. Not because he was stronger than David or Samson, but because he feared losing what he hadn't yet seen, but knew God had promised. He didn't flee because he lacked desire. He fled because he refused to forfeit destiny for momentary pleasure. That's the difference. Not strength, not willpower, but perspective. David's mistake became a wound in his house for generations. Samson's fall led to his final act being a suicide mission. But Joseph's integrity led to promotion, to restoration, to divine placement in Pharaoh's palace, because he passed the test in private. So ask yourself, what's at stake behind this temptation? What divine door might be waiting behind your obedience? Because the enemy isn't attacking your body. He's targeting your blueprint. He's trying to delay the future that your obedience is building. He doesn't want to steal your moment. He wants to steal your legacy, your lineage, your impact. He wants to reroute your life with a single compromise because he knows how powerful you'll become if you stay the course. But here's the revelation. You are not defined by your lowest moment, but by what you choose next. Even David, after falling, got back up. He repented, he wept, and God still used him to birth the lineage of the Messiah. That means failure doesn't cancel favor, but ignoring conviction might. So the question isn't, will I ever feel temptation? The question is, what will I choose when it comes? Because legacy is not built in stages. It's built in secrets, in moments where no one is watching, when you could say yes, but choose to say no. And here's the most terrifying truth. Sometimes your greatest test will look like your deepest desire. And if you're not careful, you'll confuse temptation for confirmation. You'll think, this must be God opening a door, when it's actually the enemy offering a trap with a view. Stay awake, stay discerning, stay grounded. Because the line between glory and grief can be one decision wide. And if the giants of Scripture, men of valor, strength, and intimacy with God, could fall or come close to falling, then your struggle does not make you unworthy. It makes you human. And it makes your awareness your greatest protection. But don't let awareness become paralysis. Let it become strategy, because when you know you're walking a narrow path, you'll guard every step with intentionality. And you, chosen one, you will not repeat the pattern, because what's coming after you depends on the choices you make now. So ask yourself this: who will benefit from your purity 10 years from now? Whose chains will break because you decided to run like Joseph, instead of looking like David, or surrendering like Samson? Legacy begins in what you refuse to touch. And what I'm about to reveal next might shake the way you see temptation forever. Because what the enemy is really after has nothing to do with your pleasure, and everything to do with your purpose. Stay with me. The next layer changes everything. Let's pull back the curtain. Because this is not random. This war you're in, it's not a coincidence. It's calculated, planned, engineered by darkness with one goal: to cripple the chosen before they activate. And the first place the enemy strikes? Your sexuality. Not because it's dirty, but because it's divine. Sexuality isn't just physical, it's spiritual, it's creative, it's covenantal. It was the first gift given to humanity in the garden. Before there were temples, priests, or even prophets, there was intimacy between man and woman, and between humanity and God. Sexuality mirrors divine union. It bonds two souls. It builds legacy. It opens portals between generations. That's not biology. That's design. So of course the enemy targets it. Because anything God creates with power, hell tries to counterfeit with poison. That's why the attack is so early, so personal, so shameful. Because the earlier he distorts it, the longer you carry confusion. He wants to rewrite your relationship with your body, with intimacy, with boundaries, with love. And he does it through addiction, trauma, secrecy, and silence. But hear this: the enemy does not waste time on things that don't threaten him. If your purity is under attack, it's because your power is waking up. He wants to make you believe you're disqualified before you even step into your assignment. So he lures you into cycles: click, scroll, swipe, text, guilt, shame, repeat. And every time you try to break free, he whispers, too late, too stained, too messed up. God's done with you. But that's not conviction. That's condemnation, and it's a lie from hell. Because here's the truth: the presence of the battle does not cancel the presence of your calling. It confirms it. You think you're fighting because you're broken, but you're fighting because you're dangerous. Your obedience threatens systems. Your purity carries frequency. Your healing releases others. And the enemy can't afford to let you walk in it. So he wraps chains around your desires. But listen closely. Desire is not your enemy. Distortion is. The enemy doesn't need to remove your gifts. He just needs to dirty your perception of yourself so you never use them. He doesn't care if you go to church. He doesn't care if you pray. As long as you're stuck in shame, you'll never walk in power. He knows something you don't. Your body is a portal, a gateway, a temple. And if he can get you to treat the sacred as casual, you'll unknowingly open doors that let darkness walk in uninvited. But you were never meant to be a doormat for demons. You were meant to be a dwelling place for glory. And the moment you reclaim this area, even after years of failure, heaven starts rebuilding what hell tried to demolish. You don't need to be perfect. You need to be awake. When you start to see this war for what it is, you stop playing defense and start walking in discernment. You stop saying, "Why do I keep messing up?" and start asking, "What is hell so afraid of me becoming?" Because this is bigger than your habits. This is about your harvest. Every seed of obedience you plant now is a weapon against the generational patterns that tried to enslave you. And every moment you choose purity over pleasure, you realign yourself with power. Not fake, religious power, but real, tangible, heaven-backed authority. The kind of authority that heals bloodlines. That silences voices of accusation. That walks into a room and shifts the atmosphere. That's what's at stake. And that's why this is the first area the enemy comes for. Because if he can twist your view of intimacy, he can sabotage your capacity to connect with God, with others, and even with yourself. But here's what the devil didn't expect. That even after the battle, you'd still be here. Listening, fighting, rising. That even with all the shame he threw on you, you'd still dare to believe there's something greater ahead. He didn't expect you to wake up, to see the strategy, to expose the pattern. But now you do. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. And once you name it, you can reclaim it. You are not disqualified. You are not too far gone. You are on the edge of redemption. And if this is the first area he attacked, then it's the first area God is about to restore. Because the place of greatest warfare is about to become the place of greatest glory. And now that you know what's really going on, you're ready to go even deeper. What I'm about to show you next is not just about resisting sin. It's about unlocking a level of intimacy with God that turns purity into power. You don't want to miss this. What's coming will shift everything. Let's be honest. Most of this war isn't happening in public. It's not in your church, not in your group chat, not on your Instagram story. It's happening when the door is closed, when the lights are off, when no one's texting, when your worship playlist stops playing and you're left alone with your thoughts. That's the battleground, the secret place. But here's what religion often gets wrong. They tell you to fight this battle with rules, with shame, with discipline alone. But you don't win this war just by trying harder. You win it through encounters. Because discipline might modify behavior, but only divine presence transforms identity. You see, the secret place is not just a room. It's not just a prayer corner. It's the space where your soul gets exposed and embraced at the same time, where you bring what's raw, not what's rehearsed. God is not impressed with perfect prayers. He's moved by honest ones. And in that honesty, when you bring your failure instead of hiding it, when you confess the urges, the images, the struggles, the cycles, something sacred happens. Heaven doesn't turn away. It leans in. Because God never asked you to be perfect. He asked you to be transparent. The secret place is not where you prove your holiness. It's where you surrender your humanity. It's where your mask falls, where your voice trembles, where your tears finally tell the truth your words have been avoiding. And in that moment, when you stop hiding, healing begins. Because here's the supernatural principle. God only heals what you're willing to expose. What remains in darkness remains in bondage. But the moment you speak it in the presence of the holy, it loses its grip. Shame shrinks in the light. Sin suffocates in the presence of grace. Because grace doesn't just forgive, it restores. In the secret place, your weakness becomes an invitation for God's power to invade. It's where whispers become weapons, where I can't becomes God, you can, where cycles begin to break not by force, but by fire. This is the place where demons tremble, not because you're shouting, but because you're surrendering. It's not loud, it's not flashy, but it's dangerous to darkness. You don't need a stage. You don't need a microphone. You don't need a title. You just need a closed door and a spirit that says, God, I'm tired of pretending. Because when you finally stop performing for God, you allow Him to perform in you. And what happens next isn't just deliverance, it's transformation. You begin to change not because you fear punishment, but because you've tasted presence. And once you've encountered that, nothing else satisfies. The secret place is not your last resort. It's your source of power. It's where you'll hear the whisper, "You're still mine." Even after you fell, even after you ran, even after you did the very thing you said you'd never do again. Because God is not afraid of your mess. He walks into it with mercy in His hands and strategy in His voice. In that sacred space, He doesn't just forgive the sin, He rewrites the identity. He shows you who you really are, not what the addiction says, not what the shame screams, not what the enemy accuses, but what He designed from the beginning. Chosen, called, clean, capable, covered. That's what gets unlocked in the secret place. Not perfection, but power through surrender. And the irony? The place where you feel the weakest, when your voice is shaking, when your flesh is screaming, when your heart feels numb, is exactly where God releases His strongest waves of grace. You don't have to have it all together. You just have to show up. Because when you show up in the secret place, God starts a holy takeover. And what used to control you starts losing its voice, its power, its pull. Because now, something stronger has entered the equation: intimacy with the Almighty. And when that becomes your addiction, there's no counterfeit that can satisfy you anymore. So here's the question: will you keep hiding behind religion, performance, and silence? Or will you enter the place where heaven does surgery, not on your behavior, but on your soul? Because behind that door, God isn't looking for the version of you that knows the verses. He's looking for the one who says, "I'm struggling, I'm tired, but I still believe you can change me." That's the one He comes for. That's the one He touches. That's the one He transforms. And if you've made it this far in the video, it means your spirit is already leaning into that place. So don't stop now, because in the next part, we're going to talk about something most people have never realized. That purity isn't a restriction, it's a weapon. And when you understand how to wield it, everything in your spiritual atmosphere begins to shift. Stay with me. You're closer than you think. Let's destroy a lie that's kept too many chosen ones in confusion for too long. Purity is not about shame. It's not about control. It's not about looking holy on the outside while secretly dying on the inside. Purity is a spiritual weapon, and the enemy knows it. That's why he works overtime to make you believe that purity is just a list of rules. A cold, restrictive system designed to kill your joy and silence your desires. He paints purity as a prison, because if you ever saw it for what it really is, you'd become unstoppable. Let's be clear. Purity is not about suppression. It's about alignment. Alignment with identity, with power, with destiny. Because when you're sexually pure, not just in action, but in thought, in desire, in intention, your spirit becomes razor sharp. Your discernment wakes up. Your prayers hit harder. Your authority multiplies. Why? Because there's no fog between your heart and heaven. You're no longer being drained by cycles that bleed your energy. You're no longer giving pieces of yourself to people who were never assigned to carry you. You're no longer exchanging your future for 5 seconds of forgettable comfort. You become undistracted, and therefore dangerous. Listen, the enemy doesn't care about your pleasure. He cares about your power. He wants you bound, not because of lust, but because he knows what you'd activate if you ever walked in freedom. Because purity is more than abstaining from sex. It's walking in a state of spiritual clarity. It's hearing God before you hear temptation. It's seeing the trap before you step in it. It's feeling his presence so strongly that anything fake becomes obvious. That's why when you're truly walking in purity, you stop falling for counterfeits. You don't need validation from strangers. You don't chase relationships that look good but starve your soul. You don't beg for attention because you know you're already seen by heaven. And here's something no one tells you. Purity attracts provision. It positions you. It opens divine doors, because God won't build legacy on contaminated foundations. He's looking for hearts that won't sell sacred ground for momentary pleasure. He's looking for warriors who understand. Consecration is the price for dominion. This is about influence, territory, impact, not rules. Do you really think the people God is raising to shift nations can afford to be tangled in secret sin? Absolutely not. Because when your spirit is leaking through compromise, you lose the weight of your words. You lose the sound of your authority. You might still be speaking, but hell's no longer listening. And that's what the enemy wants. A generation of gifted people who are powerless, talented but tormented, visible but empty, loud but ineffective. But that's not going to be you. Because now you know the truth. Purity is not about living less. It's about living fully aligned. It's about protecting the oil on your life, guarding your altar, becoming a vessel so clean, so available, that when heaven looks for someone to send, your name is the one echoing in the spirit. And let's make something crystal clear. Purity is not just about saying no. It's about saying yes to a higher call, a deeper mission, a supernatural life. Because purity doesn't just protect you, it prepares you. Every no to lust is a yes to clarity. Every moment you flee temptation is a moment you step deeper into destiny. Every time you choose the secret place over the secret sin, you're being refined, sharpened, anointed. And eventually, you stop just surviving temptation, and you start conquering atmospheres. You shift rooms. You carry something the world can't imitate. You burn with something no demon can touch. Because purity isn't just a concept, it's a fire. And once it consumes you, the things that used to seduce you can't even stand next to you. And here's the most powerful part. Even if you've failed before, even if you've fallen 1,000 times, the moment you choose alignment, the heavens respond. God is not looking for your past. He's looking for your yes. He's not counting your mistakes. He's watching for your surrender. Because one moment of surrender can reverse years of shame. And what once felt like chains can become your testimony. Your scars become swords. Your story becomes strategy. Your former weakness becomes someone else's weapon. So don't just fight for purity because it's the right thing. Fight for it because it's the only path to the life God designed for you to live. Fight for it because it changes everything. And now that you've seen this, you can't go back. Because when you walk in purity, you walk in power. When you're aligned, you're undeniable. And when you're undeniable, the enemy can't stop what heaven already set in motion. But now there's one final revelation, and it's the most important of all. Because after everything we've exposed, after every war we've named, there is still a moment that separates those who fall back from those who rise forever. What I'm about to show you next is not just a conclusion. It's an activation, a call to step into the fire and never look back. You're not ready to stop. You're ready to awaken. Stay with me. Because everything changes now. Let this truth hit you like thunder in your chest. You're not in this battle because you're broken. You're in it because you're a threat. The enemy isn't wasting ammunition. He's not playing games. He's targeting you with precision, because your life is a divine weapon in the making. You are dangerous to darkness. You carry fire in your bones. You were marked by heaven to interrupt patterns, shatter chains, and unlock doors that others couldn't even find. That's why hell came for your purity, not for pleasure, but to poison your power. That's why shame tried to strangle your voice, because your words carry weight, because your obedience echoes in the spirit realm, because your surrender isn't just saving you, it's setting others free. And you've been wondering, why is this so hard? Why won't this cycle break? Why do I feel like I'm drowning in silence? Here's why. Because the enemy saw what's coming through you before you ever did. But what he didn't calculate was that you'd keep rising, that after every fall, you'd crawl back into the secret place, that after every tear, you'd still whisper, "God, don't let me go." He didn't expect you to survive the guilt. He didn't expect you to resist again. He didn't expect you to wake up today, watch this message, and feel something inside you start to ignite. Because God knew. He saw the war. He saw the struggle. And still, he said, "I want you." Not when you're perfect, not when you figured it all out, but right now, in the middle of the fight. You are not disqualified. You are in the refiner's fire. And what's coming out of this season will carry glory like nothing you've known.